It is our honor to introduce Dr. Joan Johnson Freese, a distinguished senior fellow with Women in International Security. Dr. Johnson Freese has significantly contributed to the field of political science during her 2 decades of tenure as a university professor and chair of the National Security Affairs Department at the Naval War College. Her expertise spans various critical areas, notably women, peace, and security, where she has published multiple influential articles and has authored 7 books and over 100 articles on space security. Additionally, Dr. Johnson Freese authored Educating America's Military and testified before a Congressional House Armed Service Subcommittee advocating for the inclusion of women, peace, and security in PME curricula. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Joan Johnson Freese.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the Valkyrie Project for inviting me again. This is one of my favorite organizations to come and work with because you're substantive. You network beautifully, you work together, and it's just all the things that I think are important, especially right now. And I've been invited today to talk about my new book, which I'm really pleased to do. It's called Leadership in War and Peace, Masculine and Feminine. I can't tell you how long it took to get this cover approved. It had to go before panel after panel of men. Does it offend you? Are the colors okay? Would you buy it? Is it the dove too much? And the editors, my editors, well, can we take off the masculine and feminine part? All this is because last year when I was here, I was talking to you about women, peace, and security. And the class that I took, or that I teach at Harvard Extension and summer schools is called Women, Peace, and Security. But women, peace, and security has a branding problem. People don't get past the first 2 words. They assume it's a gender studies program. They assume it's a social justice program. And as David and others have talked about, why aren't there more men in the room when we're talking about these issues? Because it's about women. It's about peace. We're war fighters. In my class, it was always 80 to 90% women. But the substance is critical to everybody. So what this book actually does, and it was fascinating to sit this morning and listen, is get to the education and the language piece of trying to get this information that we all know is so valuable to the audience it needs to reach. Because as was said before, and this is one of the 2 bumper stickers for my class and my book, you can't implement what you don't know about. So this is sneaking in everything we've talked about this morning to men. Men will read books and take classes on leadership far more than they will women, peace, and security. And it is important, as was said earlier, to talk about it in terms of data, to talk about what women in the military bring to lethality. And I was introduced from Samantha last year to language that I now use on a regular basis. When I have data to back it up, I talk about the 5 R's. Recruitment. Women increase the talent pool for recruitment. If they are satisfied and feel appreciated in their jobs, they will stay, which addresses retention. If you're not constantly retraining, it saves resources, it keeps readiness high, and affects risk to mission, risk to force. People like that language. I use it all the time now. But it also is important to bring in what else women bring to decision making. So the thesis of this book, I'm going to read it so I don't screw it up. The thesis is that future great and even good leaders will need to recognize and understand both masculine and feminine styles, traits, and skills, and how and when to use each to maximize each individual's personal potential effectiveness, and so the team or organization's effectiveness. Varied perspectives and approaches matter in leadership of war and peace. It's not about men or women being better. It's about bringing balance to planning, decision-making, execution, because sometimes one approach will work, sometimes another will work. So in the book, I talk about leadership styles, I talk about the importance of context, I talk about ethics, case studies, and something I think we don't pay enough attention to, and that is masculinities. We've spent almost 50 years talking about the changing feminine role, but we don't spend similar time talking about the need to change men's view of masculinities and that what that requires from them. But I do think it's important. Oh, I do a lot of case studies, many case studies. Petraeus, Rumsfeld, Grace Hopper, Elise Stefanik, a lot of many case studies. And I spent a lot of time doing interviewing leaders at all levels, from the military, from government, from the private sector, even from sports. And it was interesting. When I started interviewing people, I would get calls and emails saying, I heard you're doing interviews. Can you interview me too? People were eager to share their experiences. People want to have their story told. So what I've tried to do in the book is combine data, research, and stories. And the purpose is to get people talking, get discussion going, get those conversations that David just talked about, get them going, and give a venue for doing so, give an opportunity for doing so that opinions can be shared. I thought I might give you a couple examples of the stories that were offered to me, because I think they will resonate with you. And I'm giving you condensed versions for time purposes, but you'll get the point. A female general officer I interviewed told of working in a parallel position to a male leader at her same rank who was both feared and loathed by most who worked for him. They both received an after-hours tasker needing immediate attention. Her counterpart had generally ignored her in the past, but she nevertheless went to his office to discuss it with him. She was stopped at his outer office by his coward executive officer, both of them able to hear her counterpart yelling at a subordinate from his desk. So she simply went back to her office and took care of the tasker. At a meeting the next day with their mutual boss, the boss congratulated him, ignoring her, for a job well done. Her counterpart turned tentatively to her, clearly asking for permission to accept the praise. Almost indiscernibly, she nodded her head in assent, and he proceeded to thank their boss for the recognition, not mentioning her. She said they weren't organizationally competing with each other, and the job had gotten done, so she was okay with him getting the credit. She added, however, that he acted like her best friend after that. This backs up research that show women to be goal-oriented and not as concerned with ego. Women, I think that it's part of our socialization. We multitask, we have to get things done. Women, again, men show a lot of confidence, which can bleed into ego. Women are more prudent and goal-oriented. Prudence not meaning risk-averse. Prudence meaning keeping your eye on the ball and just getting it done. Another one, in a discussion with a woman military leader about the ramifications of being the only woman in the room, she conveyed an example relevant here. A meeting was called to discuss potential responses to a modest cyber incident against the United States, responses which very quickly escalated to consideration of kinetic options. Her response to the escalation was to interrupt and ask how they got there so quickly with little discussion about what are appropriate options, thereby tamping down ill-considered overreaction. This was not, she told me, a one-time situation, but happened multiple times. When I followed up by asking other women if they had similar experiences, the answer was some version of course. This backs up research which talks about women tamp down groupthink and overreaction, and optimism, which comes with groupthink. We add value beyond, again, the workforce issues. But Again, women have different experiences than men. And David talked about that blindness. It's called blind fish. The example is there's two fish swimming in a goldfish bowl. One fish says to the other fish, "How do you like the water?" And the other fish looks at him and says, "What's water?" If you've never experienced bias, you don't see it. So some of the experiences. 2 women general officers independently told me of working for great male leaders and having outstanding male mentors throughout their operational careers, only to find themselves as general officers facing gender-based resistance. One worked for a male general officer whose leadership mantra was "let people be happy," at, she felt, the expense of mission readiness. She respectfully asked a meeting with him, provided feedback, and his response, nothing to her, but to tell all those who worked with and for them, it was okay to circumvent her. When she spoke to him about that, his response was to further distance himself from her. She was so upset by this situation, she retired early, thinking surely someone would ask her for an exit interview, but disappointed that no one did. So we have a lot of these, and they come in many different areas. A lot of women talked about the issues associated with competence, confidence, and mentorship that are critical for both recruitment and retention. One woman shared an example that she was working with her boss, a very crusty, retired male Navy officer, and they were sitting in a room with a Polycom system behind them, and on the other end were contractors that they needed data from. Excuse me. The contractors were obfuscating, delaying, and finally she reached over and muted the Polycom system, looked at her boss and said, "Just tell them to give me the GD data and I'll fix it for you." And he leaned back and he looked at me and goes, "Wow, you're bossy. Now I see why you're not married." And she held her hand on the phone and said, "You know what, Jim? If I was a man, you'd simply nod your head and say, 'Yeah, you're right, let's get this over with.' But because I'm a woman, you went a different direction." A lot of women aren't in the position to take that further. Interesting point. A colleague of hers came down later and said, "I don't know what you said to Jim this morning, but he's up there muttering, 'Yeah, she was right. Yeah, she was right.'" Women can be reluctant to mentor women. Sometimes women are worn down from years of negotiating their own career gauntlet. I was sent a quote attributed to a recently pinned on woman colonel, and the quote was, "I swam through a shark tank to achieve the success I have earned. I don't have the capacity to open myself up to other women for mentorship. I have given up too much to be here," end quote. Many women are exhausted, and an active duty female Army Ranger also reminded me that there can be stigma attached to women who mentor other women as they become painted as too feminist. But given the current climate, we've got to step up. We've got to do it. Of course, there are also the stories about sexual assault, sexual harassment. A young woman Army officer told me a horrifying story that occurred in 2023 at a training event she was attending with 4 enlisted women. She was given a private room. They were put in a bunkhouse. The day after arriving, the enlisted woman came to her asking for a key because a man had come in during the night and tried to assault one of them. They were managed to get him out of the room, but they, again, would like to be able to lock the door. A key had not been provided, and when the officer asked for the key, assuming that one not being provided had just been a mistake, she was told by the holder that he was not going to give it to the women, and if they were afraid, they could barricade the door. He also told this young woman that if she made trouble over the key, he would make trouble for her, and he did. That kind of behavior, that kind of allowing that behavior and non-accountability goes to, again, points that have been raised this morning. But I would be remiss not to point out that there are masculine issues as well. There are issues, leadership issues, that men address as well. One of the best students I ever had at the Naval War College, an Army tank officer, soon after graduation, he was off to Iraq, and he served 2 tours there. It was during the second tour, I got a call in Newport, Rhode Island. He was calling from Baghdad, saying that he was asking me to write a letter of recommendation for an educational program, a PhD program. He said, I'm burnout, I know it, I'm not being the best leader I can be, I have some family issues, and I'm gonna go to school. I happily wrote him a letter. He got into one of the best programs in the world, graduated, but I ran into him. We keep in contact. We met later, and he told me a story. He said while he was still in Baghdad, one day they had helicopter landed, and his boss, a 3-star, got out, and he assumed the general was there to talk to the troops. They had incurred heavy losses that week, been in some really brutal fighting. But he wasn't. He pulled my student aside and said, "Is it true that you're taking an educational billet rather than coming back for another tour?" And he said, "Yes," and he explained why. And he said, "Well, I want you to know, if you do that, I will make it my personal mission in life to ruin your career. You will never be a general officer." Is there ever a circumstance where that type of leadership is appropriate? And he was clearly playing to this student's masculinities. So there are issues for men, there are issues for women. We have to talk about them. If we're not going to talk about them through women, peace, and security, hopefully we will do it through leadership, because I believe leadership is in crisis. Some people say, well, politics is in crisis. Well, I argue it's not a chicken and the egg which came first. Politics is in crisis because leadership is in crisis. The book talks about what type of individuals, what type of people do we want and need as future leaders for the sake of national security. And the whole point is to generate the kind of discussion that we are having here today. So thank you very much. I will mention I'm no longer teaching, at least this year, Women, Peace, and Security in my Harvard classes. Instead, it's called Leadership in War and Peace. If anybody's looking for a summer course, I would love to have you. So thank you very much.